wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. All here today is the wiggle, wiggle everywhere. Wiggle your ball sack, wiggle your big ass. There is too much wiggling.
You know what to do with that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. You know what to do with that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
Y'all's little crusty buns right on into church.
You know what I want on my cheeseburger? Pickle, pickle, pickle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
Wanna go for a walk, boy?
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. With that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. 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 You know what to do with that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. With that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
Let me see you wiggle that big fat butt.
The only thing I'm gonna wiggle is your
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. You know what to do with that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle. To do with that big fat
face.
wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle. You know what to do with that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle.
You know what to do with that big fat butt? Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
You know what to do with that big fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Fat butt. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Just a little bit.
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.